All my words are complete, over 70,000 of them. Now it's time to edit. I finished the first round, which was a read through with edits to ensure words were correct, sentences make sense, and the story flowed. Now I'm working through a checklist to tighten up the story. I'm working with critique partners as well, so now I'm working in their feedback. All of this is exciting because with different critique partners, you have different feedback, and also reading it through again makes you question, why did I use that word, or what does this sentence even mean? I need to take that out, or there's a better way that I can say that. And all of those things are happening now that I am revising the story. Oh, I didn't even introduce myself. Oh my gosh. Hey guys, I am Nichole, romance author of over 50 romance novels. I have been independently publishing them for the past 10 years. All of my books can be found on Amazon, other retailers like Barnes & Nobles, Kobo, etc., and on my direct website. I'll drop links in the description of this YouTube video, so you can just check all of those out. The book that I'm currently working on and talking about now is a book that I plan to pitch to agents this year. Fingers crossed. All right, so back to the spill. If you aren't aware, I'm a very methodical person. I love a plan, and that's likely how I've been able to write so many books. I typically schedule out a book that I want to write, and let's just say I say, this book may be 60,000 words, 70,000 words, or maybe it's going to be a short, so it'll be 10 or 20,000 words. I put that on a planner. I use a pacemaker, and it tells me how many words I need to complete in a day. I'll aim at those words. Sometimes I'll exceed it by a lot. Sometimes I'll come in right in the goal for that day, but I typically don't like to get up from my seat until all those words are done. Likewise, I have created a plan for revisions. So it took me about a month to complete 70,000 plus words in writing them, and I'm giving myself a similar amount of time to revise those words. So the goal as it is outlined today equals 3 chapters per day. So I'll be revising 3 chapters per day. And that should take up until March, maybe. But what would I do with those 3 chapters? Because 3 chapters, if you're reading back through them, making some small tweaks, it doesn't sound like a whole lot of work that has to happen, but it is. So what I'm doing and my method to my madness is, like I said, the first round of edits was me completely reading through from beginning to end, making small adjustments. Now, the first thing I'm doing is allowing Words Feature, the read aloud, to read the chapter back to me. And I'm listening to any inconsistencies that are difficult to pick up reading for myself. It's amazing what the mind will do with autocorrect. As you're typing, you may type a word that seems like it's right in the moment as you're typing it. You may read it back even in the context of the sentence and be like, oh yeah, that's the word I meant to use. But when someone reads it back to you and you're looking at the word, you might be like, oh, wait, that's not the right word. Or maybe I repeated words, because the mind is amazing at, if there are 2 words like the, it'll just skip over that second the and be like, yep, that's right, keep moving. So reading it out loud and seeing it sometimes will allow you to be like, oh, wait, that's not right. It kind of slows the brain down a little bit to capture those things that shouldn't be in your words in your story. So I like to use that feature to allow myself to edit a little bit in more detail. Then once I've gone through that whole read aloud feature for the chapter, now I'm working through a little checklist that I've created. The first thing I do is ensure each chapter has a strong opening. So you want a strong opening that will hook the reader to say, yes, I'm engaged, I want to continue reading. Then once they've continued reading, I want to make sure there's a balance between introspection, dialogue, and action. So I don't want it to be too thought heavy. I don't want it to be too dialogue heavy. And I don't want it to be too much action. I want there to be subtle pauses to allow the reader to think. This story that I'm working on in particular is a love after loss story. So there is a lot more introspection than I typically have in a normal story, because the characters are grieving, and with that, a lot of it is internalized. It's a lot that's going on in the mind in between the story. It's a lot that's going on with characters as well. So they're talking about some of that, but they're internalizing a lot of it. But I want to make sure that the reader isn't too in the weeds with all the inner thoughts that are going on with the characters. So I want to make sure there's a fine balance there. Then finally, I want an ending that moves the reader forward. I don't want the end of the scene to feel like a conclusion by any means. I don't want you to get to the end of the prologue and be like, great, that was cool. I don't really need to find out what happens next. I can put the book down. This seems like a good place to put my bookmark. I want the reader to feel like they have to know what's going to happen next. And I apologize now. I have work going on in my house, so there's some background noise going on. I'm trying to filter that out. But if you hear the little bloop, 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 that's just work going on in my house. So once I finish and I'm satisfied with those items on that checklist that I mentioned, I use a tool called Hemingway. Hemingway checks for the use of too many adverbs, passive voice, phrases with simpler alternatives, and hard or difficult to read sentences. And I will say Hemingway has been an amazing tool to point out to me what I might not pick up on my own, what even my critique partners might not pick up as they're just reading casually. The tool is the tool, and it has a, code to go in and check for these things. So it's a lot more clear in what it's finding, and it allows me to go through, and I obviously don't accept everything it says. It's still a computer, but I will go through and say, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That sentence may be hard to read, or I may go through and be like, yep, I can, switch these words out to make it flow better. So I'll go through those things with Hemingway. Now, once I made all of those changes, I'll read the chapter to myself again, and I'm happy to report the prologue is now complete. So this is day 1 of my revisions, and the prologue is complete, but as I said earlier, I have to finish 3 chapters, so I have 2 more to go. I'll finish chapter 1 and chapter 2 today. Rinse, washing, repeating that same methodology until I finish all 30 plus chapters of this story, and I am comfortable with what's complete. I will say that no matter how tight I think a story is, I'll likely find some way to change it. I find someone who will have an opinion on how to change a story, but at some point, I can't let that stop me. At some point, I have to say, it's done, this is it, this is the best story it's going to be, and I'll put it down. For this story, after these revisions, it's my hope that I'll say that by March, when it's time for me to pitch to my first agent at the Chesapeake Writers Conference, happening in Northern Virginia, I will be to that point where I'm like, this is done. Depending on the agent feedback, any other feedback that I receive, if I don't get requests, to read more, then I may continue this process again to continue to make sure that this story is as tight as it can be. As I continue revising my work and finding tips to share, I'll post them here. I'll create more videos so that you guys can have all the details that I am finding helpful to myself, because the whole point of this YouTube channel is to provide tips and tricks as I discover them myself. I hope this information is helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or send me an email even. My information is available on my website if you have more questions or think of anything else that will be helpful. And I hope that you will continue watching along this journey that I'm taking to traditionally publish this book. Thank you so much for watching.